So have you ever actually stopped to think about what happens when your eyes hit the page of a great novel or a brilliant poem? Well, let's dive right into this explainer and demystify literary theory. We're going to transform it from what might seem like a dry academic subject into a fascinating mystery of exactly how and why we read. Today we're exploring a monumental clash of ideas that totally shaped modern education. It is the Great Dichotomy, reading for meaning versus reading for form. We are anchoring our entire journey today in Hans Burton's absolutely brilliant guide, Literary Theory: The Basics. This book is kind of going to act as our map, chronicling this massive shift in how we view art and culture. We'll trace the evolution from viewing literature as this profound spiritual guide to suddenly treating it like a complex, mechanical puzzle just waiting to be solved.
Here is our roadmap for the 80 years of history we're covering today. We'll start off with the search for meaning, move on to trust the tale, explore the formalist revolution, look at breaking down the story, and finally wrap up with the science of structure. All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the search for meaning.
Let's start with something intuitive. Honestly, this is probably how most of us were first taught to read back in school, right? Treating reading as a spiritual quest for a moral takeaway. Back in the 1880s, Matthew Arnold viewed the author almost as a godlike creator of timeless truths. He actually famously called literature the best that has been thought and said in the world. You have to remember, at a time when scientific breakthroughs, like Darwin's theory of evolution, were completely shaking the foundations of traditional beliefs, Arnold genuinely believed that literature could step in. He thought it could fill that spiritual void and help us become more civilized, compassionate human beings.
This whole era was built on what's called liberal humanism, which is basically the belief in the ultimate autonomy and self-sufficiency of the subject to find meaning. This perspective tells us that human nature is just timeless. It doesn't matter if a play was written thousands of years ago in ancient Greece, liberal humanism assumes the core truths about love, tragedy, and humanity remain exactly identical. The author basically transcends their specific historical circumstances to deliver pure universal meaning directly to you, the reader.
Moving right along to Section 2, Trust the Tale.
But then, right around the 1920s and 30s, the new critics arrived on the scene, and they decided that to truly understand a text, we actually needed to isolate it completely. It presents a really fascinating challenge when you think about it. Does it matter if the author was heartbroken when they wrote it, or if you are crying while reading it, or should you literally only trust the actual words on the page? Well, the new critics threw out all that historical background by identifying two major errors readers make. First, the intentional fallacy, which is trying to guess what the author meant to say rather than reading what they actually wrote. And second, the affective fallacy, which is letting your own emotional reactions blur the reality of the text itself. Suddenly, the text became a freestanding object. As D.H. Lawrence famously put it, never trust the artist, trust the tale.
Which brings us to Section 3, the formalist revolution.
Okay, we're going to completely pull the rug out from under you now. Let's travel geographically from Cambridge over to Moscow to meet the Russian formalists. These formalists saw the author not as some godlike creator, but literally as a mechanic assembling linguistic devices. They weren't hunting for deep moral philosophy at all. They were hunting for literariness. That's the specific mechanisms that make a literary text entirely different from, say, a standard magazine article or your grocery list. They wanted to know what are the specific gears and levers, the rhymes, the rhythms, the metaphors that turn ordinary words into art. They wanted to strip away the content and scientifically examine the form.
Victor Shklovsky, a key figure here, argued that art uses this thing called defamiliarization to force us to stop and actually see language rather than just blindly recognizing it. Think about it. As we go through our daily routines, our brains kind of put our perception on autopilot. We honestly just stop noticing the world. But literature, through strange and striking language, breaks that autopilot. When a poet uses a bizarre metaphor, it temporarily confuses you, slowing down your reading and forcing you to consciously experience the words. That little jolt of strangeness, for them, that is the true magic of literature.
Okay, so how does this apply beyond poetry? Let's look at Section 4, breaking down the story.
We've been talking a lot about poetry, but how exactly does form apply to a novel? Well, it builds into an actual science of narrative mechanics. Think about how a simple chronological fabula is twisted into a really suspenseful sujet. The fabula is just the raw facts in order. A happens, then B happens, then C. But the sujet? That's the artful presentation. It's starting the book at the very end, using flashbacks, or strategically withholding information to build suspense. The formalists basically prove that the art of storytelling isn't just about what happens, but the structural sequence of how you, the reader, are allowed to discover what happens.
Then you have Vladimir Propp. He took this abstract math and applied it to fairy tales, proving that 100 completely different stories actually share the exact same structural skeleton of functions and actors. Propp realized that whether the hero is a knight getting a magical horse or a peasant getting a magical ring, the underlying function is completely identical. Hero receives a magical item. By reducing characters down to their narrative functions, like the helper, the villain, the seeker, Propp showed that vast libraries of wildly different folklore are actually just the exact same core structure, wearing different masks. And that leads us to our final stop, Section 5, the science of structure.
We're shifting gears and geography one last time to the Prague structuralists. They replaced that idea of defamiliarization with foregrounding, showing how texts act as dynamic systems of contrasting elements. Now, foregrounding relies entirely on having a background. If you have a poem written in perfectly neat rhythmic couplets, well, that establishes a background. If you suddenly drop in a jagged, unrhymed, chaotic line, that line is foregrounded. It pops right out at you. But it only works because of the structured background it disrupts. The whole text operates as this unified, interdependent system of contrasts.
Then there's Ferdinand de Saussure, who essentially proved that language is just a system of arbitrary codes, totally stripping away the spiritual magic of words and revealing them as pure, interchangeable structure. Think about it. There is absolutely no natural spiritual link between the word way and the physical dirt path you walk on. If there were, every language would use the exact same word. But we have way in English, weg in Dutch, and chemin in French. Words only generate meaning by being different from other words within a massive, invisible system of science. So meaning isn't created by some genius author, it's generated by the structure of language itself.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought to ponder the next time you sit down and open a novel. Will you read for meaning, or will you read for form? Will you be like Matthew Arnold, searching for a profound, life-altering truth about the human condition, or are you going to be a structuralist, marveling at the intricate linguistic machinery, the sujet, and the foregrounding that the author meticulously assembled just to construct that illusion of reality? Honestly, perhaps the most rewarding path is learning to appreciate both the beauty of the message and the brilliance of the mechanics. Thanks so much for exploring the depths of literary theory with me today.